G'day everyone, continuing my top 20 albums series. We're up to number 15. And classic rock fans, this is one I think you will like. This is certainly the album that's closest to approximating any of the acknowledged critical classics. And it's from one of the great English bands of the 60s, 70s, even 80s, you might say. It's The Who, and it's there, in my opinion, easily their best album and acknowledged as a rock classic. Who's Next came out in 1971, this album. Like a lot of older stuff, I didn't get into this until about 10 years later, actually. I remember I was in year 11 in 1981 and somehow stumbled across the whole album. Like a lot of people, I'd heard the absolute standards of this, Won't Get Fooled Again, and Barbara O'Reilly, arguably the best opening and closing tracks off any rock album. They are absolute epics, both of them. And certainly a lot of younger people have heard them a lot on TV over the years in various ads or shows. I know the CSI series, I think they used 4 songs by The Who in various CSI series. Won't Get Fooled Again, I think, was CSI Miami. I'm not a big viewer of those shows. And Barbara O'Reilly might have been CSI New York. But The Who really amped things up for this album. And I think it's held its, I guess, spot in time beautifully. It just stands up remarkably well today. I would argue it actually stands up better than most things that, say, the Rolling Stones or the Beatles put out. I know that's a controversial call, but this is a very personal selection. So it's a bone-crunching album. Starts off with Barbara O'Reilly. They used a bit of synthesizer in this album, notably on those 2 tracks, but they certainly don't dominate. Very much guitar and drum driven. But the whole album is great. There's not a dud track on it. 9 tracks. After Barbara O'Reilly, you've got Bargain, which is a real rocker as well. Love Ain't For Keeping, a shorter sort of acoustic. Nice song though. My Wife, which John Entwistle sings, and fair to say he's not the same vocalist Roger Daltrey is. And The Song Is Over, which is, I guess, a power ballad of sorts. I don't like many power ballads, but that one I do. Getting in Tune, Going Mobile, Behind Blue Eyes, which I think a lot of people would have heard. That was covered by a lot of people. And finishing off with Won't Get Fooled Again. Musically, I mean, it's pretty hard to fault The Who, isn't it? Daltrey, a great vocalist. Pete Townsend, terrific songwriter and guitarist. Entwistle as a bass player. As a very shoddy bass player myself, I've certainly always appreciated his ability. I remember hearing a story that he played with 4 fingers on his picking hand, which I find quite hard to believe, but I guess it's true. And Keith Moon, who sadly passed away in 1978 in controversial or typical rock and roll circumstances. A terrific drummer, a chaotic drummer all over the place, but somehow made it hang together with the bass playing of Entwistle. So it's a really powerful record. I find a lot of alleged hard rock records of the early 70s probably don't sound that hard by today's standards, or maybe not today's standards, maybe 90s standards. But this one I think does. It really packs a wallop. Famous cover on this record, of course, too, the concrete pillar protruding from a slag heap and the guys in the band walking away looking like they've just had a piss on it. Bit of an urban myth that I think Pete Townsend apparently was the only one who actually did have a piss, and they got a jug of water to make it look like the others had. One of those stories. I guess the bigger an album gets, the more stories there are attached to it. But this, for me, is The Who at their peak. They put out a terrific live album, Live at Leeds, the year before this came out in 1971, and really carried it on over into this record. Kept going for a fair while after that, even after Keith Moon died. He was replaced by Kenny Jones on drums, but it all wound up for them around the 1982 mark, I think, Face Dancers. But nothing they did subsequent to this was in the same ballpark as far as I'm concerned. This is a massive record. I mean, Won't Get Fooled Again is probably one of my favourite tracks of all time, and Barbara O'Reilly's certainly up there as well. Anyone who's right into that era of rock music, I'm sure, would have this album and appreciate it for what it is. It's how many years later now? Nearly 50 years later, and it still stands up brilliantly, I think, and certainly an older album that I'm never shy to drag out and give a good spin very, very regularly. So that's number 15 in the countdown. It is The Who's Next. And if you're one of the handful of people on the planet that haven't heard it, I suggest you check it out. We'll be back shortly with number 14. I'll see you later.